Okay, it's 6 o'clock. Please note that all members of the board, with the exception of Nelson, are here. Carol Gregg is here somewhere. Where is she? Okay, well, she goes over there, but she'll be here. And so this is verification of compliance with open meeting law. This is to certify that the provisions of section 551001 of the Texas Government Code have been met in connection with public notice of this meeting. And now we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance and to the U.S. and Texas flags, and Tammy Hawkins will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance
to Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Threw me off a bit. Oh, well. The invocation will be done by, I'm sorry, Dr. Steve Brown.
Would you join me, please, bow your heads. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Father, thank you for the love and grace that you give to us. Father, we just ask that you watch over us during these deliberations, and Father, that each decision and consideration that we make will be pleasing to you and would honor our students and our community. Father, we just ask now that you watch over this group, get them home safely. We ask that you give protection to those against this virus, this pandemic that we're encountering at this time. It's these things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
And as you all well know, we usually have students doing this, but because of COVID-19, our board members stepped up. And now the number 5 on the agenda is special presentations. Dr. Murray.
Ask Dr. Smith to join me down front. A little too happy.
No, she's been very happy.
Expected tears tonight. That's exactly. So a couple of words before I present this to you. I started a year ago in the month of July, and I think that was your first time, or probably moving into as your first presidency, and so I got to do this with you, and I appreciate, just as the superintendent, the way that the interactions that we've had, your love and passion for the school district, the questions that you ask, which shows that you care deeply about the kids in this system. You did a wonderful job representing the 34,000 kids that we serve and the 4,200 students or faculty members that we have within our organization. So on behalf of all of those people and the folks behind you, your colleagues on this Board of Trustees, thank you for your service as president on the ECISD Board of Trustees. And we'd like to present you with this gift of appreciation.
It's been an honor.
Good deal. Let's do it.
Right here.
One more. There you go. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Good to see you.
We thank you, Donna. You've been so cool-headed and brave and good leader. We appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is opening remarks by the superintendent.
So thank you, President Avalos. I almost said President Smith. I've been saying that for a year now. We've got, at the end of the meeting tonight, we're going to provide a COVID-19 update, and we'll talk a little bit more at that time. But that seems to be the world in which we are involved in right now. Not a lot else is happening other than the recovery from, the living in, and the preparation for. So we'll provide some updates later on the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, now is agenda item number 7. Is there any public comment?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Then we have action items, and the first item is item A, the request for approval of resignation from the Board of Trustee member Joel Woodall. So,
Second.
motion has been made by Carol, seconded by Steve. Are there any questions?
I do think that as we move to accept this resignation, that we need to keep in mind the information that we received from the public during this period of time. And one of the things they asked us for was that we should go undergo some sensitivity training. I think that's something that we certainly should consider as a board. Even though this resignation brings an end to a chapter, it's not the whole book. We need to reestablish trust with a significant portion of our community, and I think it's important that we take steps to demonstrate to them that we're going to do that.
Very good, Carol. Anybody else?
I agree. A couple of things. Number one, I agree with Carol 100%, and I would like to take it just a little bit further and ask that, I'm not sure it was made specific by her comments, but I'd really like the board to undergo some sensitivity training, and I really appreciate it if you decide to do that, if you guys could research it and maybe get it on the calendar sometime in the future. And then the second thing I think we need to talk about is what happens next. Could you outline that for us?
I can do in response to your first comment. Next month, we're bringing back a presentation to you, we being staff, to talk about some data that we shared with you about 6 months ago. And a part of the recommendations that you'll see next week will be some work about sensitivity training, equity training, that kind of thing. So, I would invite you, we'll share that with you, and I'll invite you all to join us in that. And again, we can talk more next month about what that's going to look like, but I'm happy to work on that with you, absolutely. Your second question was about what happens next. The next step in the process, you as a board, you have 3 options as a board of trustees. Option number 1 is to hold an election, actually to call for an election. And that election would occur during the month of November. The position that is vacant, position 4, expires in the month of May, and that position will automatically have an election in the month of May. And so if you call for an election now, the election would occur in November, and then that position would be open again in the month of May. So potentially candidates would have to run twice, once in November to be elected and a second time during the month of May. That is an option that you have as a board. Your second option is to do nothing. You can simply leave the position vacant. The law says that if the position becomes vacated less than a year between the next opportunity for an election, which would be in May, and now we're in the month of June, so we're 11 months away from that election, that your opportunity is to leave the position vacant and allow someone to run for that position next May. So that is option 2. And then option 3 is to seek people that are interested, people that live in District 4, find out who is interested, and then allow people to apply for the position. And then you, the board, may create some kind of application review, resume review, interview process. You could really determine what that looked like as a board, and then you would appoint a person to fill the term, the remaining term, which would be 11 months, until that position comes up for election again, which is in the month of May. So again, you have 3 options. One is to call for an election immediately. The election would occur in November, and then again in May. Your second option is to leave it vacant until the next election cycle, which is the month of May. And your third option is to seek interested parties who live in District 4, allow them to apply for the position, and then you would create some form of review and ultimately appoint that individual. So I'm looking at our attorney, and I've spoken with our attorney, and those are the 3 options that you have as a board. you're able to discuss those at a point in the future, so we could certainly at an upcoming meeting, you could talk about those options and then make a decision as to which of those would be best for you.
Do we have a time frame we have to do this in? And do we have to do this in 10 days or?
There is no
There's no
time frame. The position is up for a normal election during the month of May, and so that would really be a time frame. If you didn't activate anything right now, you would call for the election in May. The candidates would actually file for the election in the January, February time frame, and they would do that on their own court because there's a vacancy.
Can we, as soon as possible, put this on the agenda, because I don't feel comfortable leaving an area unattended. I'd like to move on this quickly.
One of the questions I have would be, do we have a mechanism in which we could survey the people that live in District 4 and maybe get some feedback from the community that was being served?
We can explore that.
Yeah.
I can't answer it now, but I could. We certainly, if you're interested in finding out what the people would want, we can talk about some mechanisms that we could use to get that information. So
I think that's kind of important for the board to know what are their thoughts. Are they comfortable with leaving it vacant, or they want someone coming into that position? I think that's important to get their feedback.
Yep.
In whatever way you do.
Sure, we can explore that possibility and see if that would work.
You know, the only problem with that is that it's a process. I mean, if you do a survey or you put it out for them to, I just think that I think that we need to fill it as soon as we, I don't want to rush into it, but we need to fill it soon. And if it takes, surveys take forever.
Sure.
Well, I was thinking down in terms of maybe a 7 to 10 day window survey. And take whatever you get in terms of responses, and just to get a feel for it.
Let me ask about a meeting, because we can put this on an agenda item, or really kind of, I guess, back to Carol, your comment is you want this on an upcoming meeting. The next time we meet is the month of June or July. Do you want to wait until July, or is there?
Well, I mean, I don't want to, I want to do it at the workshop rather than, I want to do it the first meeting in July.
So you want to do it? Okay.
And possibly publish some kind of legal notice
Okay.
that it's going to be on the agenda and
Certainly.
interested.
Okay.
Well, okay.
If just to clarify, if it's a discussion item that night, you would be the 6 of you discussing the item and then making a decision as to which of the 3 options you want to exercise, and then we would go to work on which of those options.
Sure.
No, I would prefer to have it be an action item as when we discuss it,
That
we
night?
decide.
Okay, all right. Okay, we can decide that night, yes.
Yeah, that's
But
fine.
we would go to work on whatever that decision.
Well, I mean, after that, but I would rather have a discussion and have it as an action item.
Sure.
If we are ready to proceed to decide how we're going
We
to
can do
go.
that, yes.
And if we're not ready to proceed, we can table it?
You would
Sure.
have that. Absolutely correct, yeah.
Okay, that would be great. So we could give ourselves some freedom of what we need to do that's right for these people.
Okay, but, and then where we would fit in a survey?
Yeah.
We can't do one now because we can't ask.
Actually, we could.
Could.
I would think.
So what I heard, your interest is in what the community would like for the board to do.
Yes.
And so I can't promise anything, but we can investigate the possibility of getting some information for you and have it ready for
You
that.
could very easily be a 3-question survey.
Sure, okay.
And you get a feel for what the community's deciding.
So it's important, I think, to make clear that the election's going to cost money.
Yes.
It is, yeah.
Right.
Just from my position, we wouldn't do an election. To me, that, an election now would
An
be off the
expense we don't
table.
need.
No, I think that would be very wasteful and not very responsible with the taxpayer at all.
Yeah,
So
So really, we're looking at those 2 options.
leave it empty or fill it.
Or fill it, that's right.
But like I said, if you decide you don't want to make that decision at the meeting, fine, but let's put it on as an action.
No, we're absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, all right.
And I think it should be clear also, if we're seeking community opinion, I would want people to consider that leaving it vacant means not only, that area is not represented, but we've got an even number on the board, and so ties can't be broken. And we don't tie that often.
No, we don't.
But nonetheless.
I don't see that as an issue, but the other thing too, though, and on what you said, I think each one of us, and more corporate, we represent all the children and all the people in Ector County. Although we do have our own districts, we still, the decisions we make up here are for all the children. And I think that's important.
When you do whatever you're doing, what we also need to know are the people interested in serving. Because if there are people interested in serving, then I think we should definitely consider appointing someone.
And potentially in the survey, we could
Could ask
find
Are
out
you
that
interested,
information.
or do you know
If
someone
there
who
would
would be
be.
interested?
And it would be, I think, a great idea if we could publicize where people go to, number one, find out where the map is. I don't know if I live in District 4 or not, but we have a map.
Okay.
And the other things one needs to know in order to run for the seat. I think there's board policy on it that outlines the steps.
Yes, yeah. There's
And that
some
should be made
criteria.
as
Yeah, absolutely.
public as possible.
But it's certainly something you can put on the webpage.
Yes,
That's
yes,
what I
yeah.
was just thinking.
Just be careful with the map you put, because sometimes you can't read those
Those
maps.
maps are awful.
It needs to be clear what the boundaries are. Maybe just the boundaries are there.
Check with the city, maybe they may have some better maps, they have a whole department with maps.
Okay,
Geographical information.
so, everybody good?
Very good.
Okay then. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor of accepting the resignation of Joel Woodall? Unanimous.
Ms. Alves, when we go back to superintendent comment, my guest has arrived
Okay.
for superintendent comment. So may we go back
We
to
need
that
to
area?
go back. Can we go back, Tatiana?
Yes, because
Okay,
you don't
we
have
go
to follow an exact order of the items.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going back to item 6.
Yes. Yes. So thank you for that. We, as a part of COVID-19 and all that's happening, we anticipate a very challenging legislative session coming up in the month of, starting in the month of January and moving through the month of May and potentially June. And we, as a board, there will be a lot of advocacy work that we will need to do on behalf of our own organization and public schools across the state of Texas, specifically in the area of school finance. We know that our state and our nation have undergone some very significant financial challenges, which will continue over the next several months and perhaps longer. And education in the state of Texas received over 50% of what the legislature provides in their biannual contribution, both the funding of pre-K-12 as well as our college university system. And now, probably more than ever, we're going to need to make sure that we remind our elected officials how important an investment in public education is. With the knowledge that our state is going to struggle financially, we want to make sure that we take care of our own investments. We locally have a legislator, fortunately, that I was able to meet actually before I started my position. And I remember vividly walking into his office in the Capitol and engaging in a conversation about EctorCountyISD and the work that we were doing, my excitement with coming here, and then the work that he's doing as a legislator. And in my 1 year of service in this district already, I have got to know Brooks Landgraf not only just as a champion of West Texas, but very specifically a champion of ECISD. As we enter this legislative session, it is important that we have allies and people that will support the work of our system. And I think we have a very good ally in Brooks Landgraf. And so tonight he's going to join us and provide to us a legislative update on what he may foreshadow as some items on the upcoming legislative agenda. But also I think Brooks is going to serve as a good champion for us in the coming session. No pressure, Brooks. But we invite you down and share with us a little bit tonight in superintendent's comment. What's happening legislatively? Give yourself some credit for the good work that you did in the 19 session, but also what you might see coming up. So with that, Representative Landgraf, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Murray, and thank you, board members, not only for allowing me to have a little bit of time to visit with you this evening, but also for all of the good work that you do. And I don't have to tell you all, it's thankless work most of the time, but it's very important work for our students, for our teachers, for our taxpayers, and for the community. And it's because you don't get told thank you enough, I want to say thank you.
You're welcome to remove your mask.
Well, I might do that.
Oops, I had no idea that was.
I was trying to hide the beard, my quarantine beard here too. I guess I've been out there. But anyway, thank you all for the opportunity to be here. And Dr. Murray, you brought up several good points. I like your optimistic description of what the upcoming legislative session is going to be like. But before I talk about what's in store for the future, let me rewind a little bit back to 2019. As you all know, we passed House Bill 3, which was a monumental school financial reform package that, for the first time in a generation, allowed the state of Texas as a state entity to stand up and say that the future of Texas is important enough for us at the state level that we need to take some responsibility instead of continuously and constantly pushing the burden of educating our students and securing that future down to local independent school districts, while also really tying your hands in terms of resources and adding unfunded mandates. So it was really a coming to terms with the fact that we'd gotten into some really bad habits in the state of Texas over about a 30-year period, where we just put the burden on you all, and as a consequence of that, the burden on property taxpayers in this school district and school districts throughout the state to say it's your job to educate the children of Texas. But really, it's all of our jobs. And Dr. Murray may not have heard me say this, but I know you all who have been on the board have heard me say this. We have a constitutional obligation in Texas to ensure that every child in our state receives a high quality education. And that's a constitutional responsibility that I take seriously. And I think for the first time in a long time, the legislature showed that it takes that constitutional obligation very seriously. And so now we're at a critical point in time where we are, as you mentioned, confronted with a number of challenges. And quite honestly, these are challenges that we weren't expecting to have when House Bill 3 was passed a little more than a year ago. But the way that I'm looking at House Bill 3, and just so that everybody knows, this was basically an infusion of $9 billion at the state level into the public education system to help, increase the median salary for teachers across the state, to provide some dynamic pay raises for other teachers who are going above and beyond, but also to relieve the burden of local school districts from having to pick up the constantly increasing costs of public education. And of course, most of you have probably seen the bill. It's a little bit more than that, but that's the way that I would summarize it very succinctly. Now, I think you all will agree that an infusion of $9 billion like that is great. As Dr. Murray mentioned, we are on a biannual budget cycle in the state of Texas, and it's been that way since our current Constitution was ratified in 1876. But if we just do that for 2 years, I don't think that's going to do the trick. I don't think that's going to help you. I don't think it's going to help anybody. And quite frankly, I don't think it's going to send the right message to the people, and most importantly, the children of Texas. And so, even though we are going to be confronted with these challenges, and just so that everybody knows, nobody ever really writes us a thank you note out here in the Permian Basin when oil prices are, $70, $80, $90 a barrel, and we're generating billions upon billions of dollars for the state of Texas and for, very candidly, for public education in the state of Texas. But everybody seems to notice when prices drop to 30 or 40 or lower, as we've seen at different points in time this year. And I don't like that. They only notice it when it's not going very well, right? But between low oil prices and, of course, all of the challenges that are coming along with COVID-19, and by the way, sales tax revenue is largely responsible for that $9 billion that has been allocated under House Bill 3. And just so that we're clear, I'm not too worried about the 2-year commitment that's already been made. What I'm worried about, and what you should be worried about, and I know that you are, is how we make sure that we keep that commitment moving forward. And just to be very clear, and I've had conversations with Dr. Muri about this, I think it is a commitment that we made as a state. It wasn't a 2-year commitment, although that's all we legally can do. This was designed to transform the way that we approach public education at the state level in Texas. And that's a promise, in my opinion, that has to be kept. And because of that constitutional mandate, because of that constitutional obligation, and just because it's so important, we have to find a way, and we're going to have to make very difficult decisions to fulfill that promise moving forward beyond 2022, but that's what we have to do. So what I'm here to talk about is, despite low revenue, the state of Texas passed a biannual budget last year in the legislature that for the first time in the history of our state totaled approximately $250 billion. We were just shy of $250 billion. We're not going to be anywhere close to that because we don't have the revenue. Of course, as you all know, we only can spend the money that we have coming in. We're not the federal government. We just can't print more, which I think that's a good thing, by the way, that we can't do that. But anyway, we are going to be limited on the amount of money that we can spend. And so I think the approach that we have to take is we have to say, okay, let's look at that constitutional obligation to provide a system of free public schools, which is what our constitutional mandate is, and that has to be the centerpiece of our budget, and particularly for the discretionary portion of our budget when the legislature reconvenes in January of 2021. That has to be the piece that we build everything else around, because if we don't, then we're going to backslide. And quite frankly, the stakes are too high for us to do that. All of the good work that was done in 2019 and the support that we received leading up to 2019 will all have been for naught if we backtrack in 2021. And so, and by the way, even though we are in an economic slowdown across the state, it's not just the Permian Basin, as we all know, I would venture to say we're still going to be adding more students when school begins again, however that looks, for the upcoming school year. There will still be more children who need to be educated in the state of Texas. And so there's just more money that has to be added to that pie. But anyway, if we don't fulfill that promise, it's going to be doubly worse, because not only will we have lost that momentum, we will have erased the good work that's been done. And by the way, there is you obviously have skin in this game as well, not only because there's more money coming this way, but I'm not forgetting that as part of House Bill 3, we also limited your growth on ad valorem taxation to 2.5% year over year, because we basically said, okay, you can do that, and y'all were okay with that as long as we were providing this infusion of state funding. And so there's a very practical reason why we have to do this as well. And so anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is that has to be the centerpiece. And as Dr. Muri mentioned, I'm going to be a champion for that cause, but I'm probably going to need your help as well, because these are going to be very difficult decisions. As you know, public education doesn't mean the same in every community as it does in a place like Odessa, Texas. And as challenging as it can be for us sometimes, there are certain communities in this state that want to move on and try something else or do something else. And so we can't count on rock solid support from every member of the legislature. And so I encourage you to get engaged in the process, especially in the lead up as we begin the next legislative session. And while the legislature is in session, I might call upon you to provide testimony for the good work that's being done in a school district like ECISD as a result of House Bill 3, and how important that is for all of us to be able to continue our operations, because we are one of the largest school districts in the state, as you know, but we also have very unique triumphs and very unique tribulations that define who we are as a school district, and I want to make sure that those stories are heard in the halls of the Capitol. And I'm willing to do my part, but it's always good to have some backup too, right? So we can take care of the details about that a little bit later. There are a number of topics that we can discuss. I hope I haven't gone longer than you were hoping. I know you'll have a busy agenda this evening, but I will press pause for a moment and see if you have any questions about school finance or about anything else. So
I just wanted to personalize the House Bill 3 conversation. So trustees, tonight you're going to have a chance to vote on a couple of things that are related to exactly what Representative Landgraf said. The school calendar is on your agenda tonight for approval. A part of that calendar, we've added 30 days next summer to what we call those extended year days. Those 30 days are funded in House Bill 3. The only way that we could do that is because of the passage of House Bill 3. The second thing, you're not voting on it tonight, but a part of the work of our organization, you've heard me talk about the teacher incentive allotment, an opportunity to financially recognize and validate our very best and most effective teachers. All of that money is embedded in House Bill 3. And then tonight you're voting on a budget. And the reason that we're able to increase the budget and provide a cost of living increase to our employees is because of House Bill 3. And so, it is alive and well in our agenda tonight. And so that's, it was a piece of legislation, but it really means something really significant to our system. We are benefiting greatly because of that. So just wanted to make that comment. Anybody, any questions or questions?
I just want to encourage you to reach out to us. We'll do anything we can.
and I know you will. I appreciate that, and I will not hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Just thank you for your work, Brooks. You've done an exceptional job. We appreciate it.
It's my honor to serve, Dr. Crown. Thank you.
And for all the 34,000 children, they say that.
Well, I'm going to add one to those roles come this fall.
Oh, good,
Yes,
good.
ma'am.
We're excited to have
Well, she's excited to start school, and it's I've been involved with this for the last few years as a member of the legislature, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that it doesn't change when you're looking at it through one of your own children's eyes. All 34,000 of those students are important to me and to all of us in this community. So that commitment doesn't change, but it's just interesting to see it from the parents' perspective.
Flag Day. She raised a new flag. I know she says flag.
That's right.
Probably correctly.
Yes.
Poor thing hasn't been able to escape.
Well, thank you, and for the teachers and everybody here, we say thank you for fighting for us.
And while I'm here, during the last session, while we did have tremendous success with House Bill 3, I did implement a few changes, or propose a few changes to the standardized testing structure. Basically, and Dr. Muir, you and I haven't had a detailed conversation about this, but I still think that we are ripe for reform in that area as far as the A-through F accountability system and how reliant it is upon standardized test scores, which are influenced by so many factors that are beyond the control of a school board, of a superintendent, or of teachers for that matter, which is the really important part. And then, of course, we've heard all of the stories and seen the negative impact that can have on a student's experience, and in many cases can actually inhibit their ability to learn. And then, of course, we know how that has a negative impact on the morale of faculty members. And then also, are we really even measuring what we are trying to measure? And I think that there are a lot more questions than answers to those questions. And I'm going to continue to pursue options that reform that, but I'm also looking for suggestions for ways to make that better. Also, under the recapture system that we have in state, of course, I've also tried to minimize that. Now, we did actually have some success during, as part of House Bill 3, I was able to offer and get an amendment added on to that diminishes the obligation that a school district like EctorCountyISD, and quite frankly, the other 6 school districts that I serve in my House district, where more is taken under what used to be known as the Chapter 41, and we were able to minimize the amount that's being paid, where even before the bottom dropped out on us earlier this year, EctorCountyISD's obligation under recapture was going to be reduced down to 0 from, it was only going to be a few $1 million this year, but as you all know, you can use every dollar that you can get. The benefit was even more significant for some other school districts in our area that were paying even more. Andrews ISD, for example, I think was able to save about $12 million. And then if it does come back up again, and I'm sure it will, But we also included a provision in House Bill 3 that I added on as an amendment that would allow that payment when it does become due for a school district like EctorCountyISD to make one lump sum payment at the end of the fiscal year so that you can at least get the benefit from interest that would accrue from that revenue, which should be worth at least a few FTEs even in a modest year. So, if you can't get the whole, you can't get it all at once sometimes, but any incremental changes or improvements that we can make while we plot to get the whole thing is what I'm always going to be after. So if you have any ideas along those lines, I'm always happy to hear about those or anything else. So any other questions that I can address? I wish I had better news for you all.
I just want to say thank you for not running for U.S. Congress and sticking with us.
There you go.
We needed that experience and that dedication and loyalty to our community, so thank you.
Well, the way I saw it, my job wasn't finished, and I didn't want to abandon my post before it was. So, but I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you for the opportunity to visit with you. Keep up the good work. I know this is going to be a busy time these next few weeks. But thank you for everything that you do to serve our community and most importantly to help secure that future for our students. So, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thanks, Dr. Gray.
Okay, next on the agenda is discussion of and request for approval of the 2020-2021 compensation plan, and that is Stephanie. And I'll have to get more forms after.
I answered anything nice.
Okay, very
And sometimes things aren't so nice. So, thank you, President Avalos, Dr. Murray, members of the board. In your board book, you actually have the full compensation manual, a little over 48, 49 pages. I'm going to hit some of the highlights of that. As you recall, last year the district participated in a salary study with TASB. We participated in what's called a maintenance salary study again this year as we continue to remain competitive. So I'm going to hit the highlights and then I'll be glad to answer any of the questions. We're going to be recommending, or we are recommending, a 2% midpoint cost of living adjustment for all employees, plus equity adjustments that would bring employees to 90% of market value as identified by the TASB salary study. Teachers, librarians, and nurses constitute the biggest percentage of our employees, and they will receive a $1,200 cost of living adjustment, and that moves the starting salary to $54,250, which is an increase of $2,250 from this year. Because of that increase, teachers at steps 1 through 12 would receive additional adjustments in order to create that equity from 0 to steps 12. And that constitutes 51% of our salary adjustments. As we began the budget process, and the reason we're going before budget is because about 85% of the budget is compensation. And so you asked us when we began the budget process to really look at our hourly employees and consider additional adjustments for employees who are our hourly employees. And so we're excited to say that we've done that. While we're recommending the 2% midpoint for cost of living for all employees, our hourly employees' starting pay ranges range anywhere from 4 to 5% higher than they were in this previous year. And that constitutes 30% of the salary adjustments that we're recommending. In addition to the salary and salary adjustments, we also want to point out that one of the biggest pieces, or another piece of compensation our employees receive that sometimes goes unnoticed, is our contribution for their medical insurance. And so the district contributes $4,560 per employee annually for medical insurance. So that is money that they're not having to be out of their pocket. Also, our contributions from employees will not increase this year for their insurance, for their medical insurance. And so that is the overview of the compensation plan. If there are specific questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
Very well done.
Well, I specifically thank y'all because a lot of times we give them a raise and then you take it away with the insurance benefits. So I'm just glad we're not doing it.
And I do want to thank Stacey Ashley, members of her team, Lady Mangia, just has not even, well, I guess she's officially started in HR. And then Jennifer Moran in position control. Those three ladies have been instrumental in getting the compensation plan ready to go and ensuring it's accurate and has taken care of our employees. So I appreciate them. She's on standby with last year's because you never know what questions you might ask. And so, we're ready in case you do have questions. But they did all the work and put the package together. So we appreciate that.
And I did know what you said with all the employees, because we really did want to make sure that all our employees benefit. We thought a lot about that. And the ones that are getting, out there fighting the good fight right now, they're getting.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So a couple of quick questions. Number one, people, assuming that we vote for this, I cannot imagine that we won't. This goes into effect September 1st.
So it depends on the employee's contract. For 217 plus state employees, their first paycheck of the year is July, the end of July. For 187 employees or below 217, their first paycheck of the year is September. And so it goes into effect then. I also want to point out, and I'm glad you asked that question, our teacher's salary schedule that we're publishing is for new hires. And so we have 100 and some odd employees on the teacher scale, over 117 nurses, librarians, or teachers that are over the 30 years of experience. They will get that $1,200 adjustment if they're already our employees. And so while we will bring new people in with that cap of 30, our employees who are already in the district will get that $1,200 adjustment for next year. And then, of course, that would be an annual thing because the compensation plan and the salary schedule is approved on an annual basis.
Second question, if someone wanted to know, who would they call to find out what their salary increase will be?
Right. So they would start with HR, then start with Ms. Ashley, and then, of course, if it's a simple equation, teachers, it's easy. They have the step scale and it's easy to look at. For our employees that are on the minimum, midpoint, and maximum range, we have scenarios where we can explain what the raise is because it's the cost of living adjustment is the exact same for every employee in a pay grade. When it comes to the equity adjustments, we'll be preparing salary verification sheets that go out at the beginning of the year. We started that last year. That's the first year we had done that in a while anyway. I don't know, how long ago. But a salary verification sheet for every employee where they see what it is they're making, how many years of experience we're paying them on, and that way they can help us if we've missed something and make sure that we get it corrected.
And that's the document really for everybody. So that's every employee will have that salary verification. They'll know exactly what their salary is going to be for the year. And actually verify it. If they have questions about it, they contact HR. Hey, this is too much money? We usually don't get that call. Ask a question about, I don't think this is right. And they contact human resource.
Is this a new document? Because I've got vague memories of last year there being some snafus about salary that I think those were some of your first challenges.
Yes, they were. So that is one reason why you do this process,
okay.
So that every employee can see a number on a piece of paper beside their name and certify that is my salary. And if they have questions, if it doesn't look quite right, if it's not what they thought, then they contact human resource and we investigate and make any adjustments. But yes, that's why we do it.
And every employee can understand it. I mean,
Yes.
every employee will understand if they're handing it to them. They will know this is what I'm supposed to make and this is where I can go if this is not correct.
And the compensation manual is set to go live on the website tonight. Once it's approved, as long as you approve it, it's ready to go live so that people, listening right now can click and find that and see what it is that the salary is going to be. I do want to also reference what Dr. Smith is talking about. What occurred last year had to do with some file uploads. And so we learned from that, and Art has been instrumental in helping us with that, and Jennifer Moran. Jennifer actually reports to finance, but works very closely with HR on compensation. And Jennifer was involved this year in all of the discussions and the data file uploads. she knows what she needs. I don't know what she needs, so she talked specifically with our contacts at TASB to make sure that she received every file that she needed to then upload so that those adjustments are made accurately.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I move that we adopt the 2021 compensation plan as presented.
I'll second it.
A motion's been made by Dr. Brown, seconded by Tammy Hawkins. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Motion is unanimous. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 8C, and it's a public hearing. Audience participation in a board meeting is limited to the portion of the meeting, I'm sorry. Yes, okay. Did I get the right one? No. I'm reading from a script and I've got the wrong script, which I just told Scott could happen. Anyway, there's a public hearing and adoption of the 2020-2021 official budget. Mr. Art Martin is waiting. Interim Chief Financial Officer will present this item.
Thank you. I think I'm going to just give you a brief overview of the budget, and then we're going to have our public hearing and finish up with some additional comments. But the overall budget is for the general fund is $307 million in round numbers, and then we have our food service budget and also our debt service budget, and those three funds are required by law for the school board to approve each year. And so these budgets have incorporated, particularly the general fund, those items that we have talked about in our budget hearings, the compensation plan, the adjustments based on the school board priorities that you gave us, and we have incorporated those into this budget, and that's pretty much my summary. And I think we're going to open it up for questions later after the hearing, and we'll come back and finish up after the public hearing.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Martin, and I now declare the public hearing on the proposed 2020-21 budget open. So if anyone would like to address the board about the budget, please make your way up to the podium. At this time, you will have 3 minutes to share your comments. After, once your public comments are complete, then we will close the hearing. But if anyone has any comments to make, you would give us your name, your address, and then proceed. Well, it doesn't look like we have any public comments, so we will proceed and declare the public hearing on the proposed 2020-21 budget closed. And so, do board members have any questions?
Well, I have some questions regarding equity and as we went through this budget year, Scott, you indicated we were going to do a lot of equity funding, and that the school districts with the most needs would be getting the most funding. And Donna, who is my budget expert here, because she thinks like I do in terms of, not like he does, because he thinks in terms of numbers and accounting, and my mind doesn't really translate the same way but Donna's mind does translate that way somewhat, and she's very detailed. And so I know Donna sent Art, and I'm sure that many of our D&F schools are getting less money than they got last year. Now, I'm assuming, and I understand that equity is not just based on whether they're failing schools, but I kind of understand it's not based on that at all. And it concerns me that we're not basing it partly on the fact, because in my mind, schools that are failing, all the students there are suffering. They're not receiving the equitable services that they should in school because they are in a school that is failing or a D school. And you know, these numbers that Donna provided indicate that, you know, some of our, and I really did understand the roof thing. You know, the roof thing is like logic. I can understand the roof thing. But some of the other things I don't really understand. What I really would like to be able to understand better is, we talk about equity, not equality. And we talk about the fact that we're going to be providing additional resources to our schools. And I'd like to be able to see that in terms of the schools and the funds we're providing them, and ultimately how they're utilizing those funds and what kind of things they're bringing to those students that we're providing with that equity fund. I don't mean I need to know how many pencils or pens, but in general, we gave Dowling, I understood a little bit about what we did with Dowling, we did this and we did that. I want a better feel for that, and a feel for how many of our failing schools are not getting any kind of equitable adjustment. Sometimes I guess it's apples to oranges, but we're just looking at last year's numbers and this year's numbers, and taking out the roof thing, which evidently the roof thing is that the schools that got new roofs last year had an additional $500,000 in their budget. It's not there this year. That made a difference. And the schools that are getting new roofs this year have an additional $500,000. That's not in there, but that would take care of 6 schools. There are a lot more schools than that that are not showing that. So, is there a way that at some point in time we can figure out how using the words equity translates into what's actually happening with our kids and what they're actually getting and who the kids are in the schools? I don't want the name of the kids, but I want to know. Dowling is getting this because we think equitably they have this many students and they need these additional resources. And the principal decided that this is a good way to use that. Surely there are ways that have been tried in the past productively show that if you do this, you can make a difference. And our principals that are at our DNF schools, some of them are, I'm sure, excellent principals, but they are at schools that are not doing well. So perhaps they need additional assistance in how to use that equity funding to make the most difference in bringing the schools up.
So a couple of clarifications. The equity funding that we allocated this year was tied to kids and not schools. And we funded 3 very specific types of students this year. We funded students of poverty, and wherever they happen to be. So any school that had a kid of poverty got more money. And clearly the more students of poverty you have, the more money you're going to get. The second group that we funded were our special ed students. And so wherever our special ed kids happen to be, at whatever school it is, for every special ed child that you serve, you got more money to help you serve those children. The third group of kids were our English learners, those students that are identified as EL students. Schools that serve that population received more money based upon the number of EL kids that they have. And so the money was not allocated by school, it's actually allocated by kid. And because all of our schools serve children that fall into those 3 categories. Some schools clearly serve many more. We have several schools that have very high percentages of kids in poverty, so they received a lot more money than other schools may have received. Some of the discrepancies between last year and this year I'll let Art speak to, but there are, most of this falls into personnel, and it's the way that personnel was, I'll say, funded last year, the way the numbers were recorded, versus the way that we're funding this year. But I'll let Art kind of address that.
Before you go there, let me just
Sure.
say, I understand it's the way we did that this year, but
Yeah.
I would ask in the future, we take into consideration failing schools, because those kids at those schools are not being equitably served. If you've been in a school your entire, as you mentioned before, some kids go through our school system in a failing school. There ought to be some kind of incentive that we work into, that if you're in a failing school, that you need additional resources. You're not getting the same thing. Even if the kids are poor at this other school, whatever reason, they've got a great principal, they've got this, they've got that, they're performing at a higher level and they're getting more resources in terms of benefits of the education.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that either. I agree with what you're saying. I think sometimes it's hard in budgeting. It's kind of like the roofing example that is there. Typically a roof, those funds are located at the district level. and because it's a district service provided to a school, and it really throws the budgeting process for a loop. If you're looking at a school that got $500,000 more, it's because they got a new roof. That has nothing to do with the education of children. It has to do with the age of their roof. So I think we have some opportunities, looking forward, to more effectively tie dollars to the learning of our children as opposed to maybe the maintenance of the school. There's some things we can do to kind of clarify.
Could I tag on you for, I talked to Art, and he's going to make sense, he's going to be really reasonable, and you're going to be great. But what I was thinking about while Carol was talking, and it was precipitated by your comment that I know I've heard you say before, but I didn't think through the implications, that equity funding is tied to the child rather than to the school. I guess my question for you going forward with this budget cycle, shouldn't there be opportunities with other money in other places to do some school-based analysis and supplementation?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm hoping that that's already something that you all are doing.
Yeah, you'll see some of that in federal funds, some of our Title I dollars. We can target those for the money for projects or special things that happen. We can do that with our own local money. Our own general fund money. There are ways that our DNF schools are supported, and you don't see that money necessarily tied to the schools. The money is more, it's budgeted centrally. The service is provided to the school, if that makes sense.
Is that money in the budget right now, the federal money, or is that coming later?
Yeah, it's coming later. You're looking at just general fund money and food service money and debt service money. That's all.
So, estimated what percentage of the total budget is still going to, I know it won't be a large percentage.
Our federal, I don't know the percentage.
I don't know the percentage either. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember the total, but it's significant. It's significant
Yeah.
money.
Do you know the percentage, Julia, right
I
off?
haven't looked at the percentage off the top of my head.
Can you ballpark the dollar
I
amount?
can say ballpark. I want to say that our planning amount, and I'm sorry, I haven't looked at the application this week, was around $6,500,000 for Title I.
That's right.
CARES Act funding that's coming is a little over $5 million.
It's a similar amount.
Yeah, Title
Oh,
II
yeah.
funds are funded at about 750,000, 800,000. Title III is about 600,000, and Title IV is about 500,000. And I have no idea about CTE or special education.
Okay, so to back on to that, and I think probably you've done it, but have you all gone through like a root cause analysis of each of these low performing schools, and are you in the process of kind of site-based plans for,
So the school improvement process actually requires a root analysis of every school. In fact, you even see those when you approve their plans. And the state even provides money if a school hits, first year F, second year, et cetera. There's a pot of money that the state provides, and our schools take advantage of those dollars. And we do that. Special projects, special programs, et cetera. And some of that money comes straight from TEA.
Can we look at our money that we are providing for the special ed and children's property and ESL, look at the additional funding, and at the end of the year, or sometime during the year, and see how that money that we provided to the school, what they did that directly improved the student that the money was intended for, improvements they made in special education, the things they did in ESL, the poverty, the things that they did that relate to.
and which one close the loop?
Yeah, so that we make sure that this is actually happening.
It really goes back to their school improvement plan. Every school is required to have a plan, and that plan drives their budget. And so we can look at the items in their plan and the dollars, if you will, that were needed to support the evidence of that plan. I mean, in my mind right now, talking off the cuff, that's probably the easiest way to do that. The money, the equity funding that we added this year was dropped into a flexible account on their campus, their supply account.
Most of the supply accounts, we allowed the principal quite a bit of
So they have
latitude.
maximum flexibility with how they use those dollars.
Well, it would be nice to know at the end of the year how they used them and how that impacted. I mean, if they use them for, I assume when they decide to use them, they've got a goal. I'm gonna use this money here and I'm hoping it'll improve this here.
And it's not gonna be for carpet or new desk or, it's gonna be for instruction.
Right.
And does it, you know, I mean, I know, I agree with what you're saying, Kel. If we're giving them more money, we want to know that they're spending that money wisely.
Sure, that's the
For
goal is,
instruction.
you know, they don't have a lot of money as it is. You know, most of a school's budget is wrapped up in personnel. They really don't even touch it because it's the people that they serve. You know, their budget, especially in elementary school, it is, I mean, it's pretty small. It pays for light bulbs, you know, and it pays for
Well, see,
pencils.
some of that stuff should be building or in another department, not in, it shouldn't be the responsibility of the principal. The roof or the light bulbs or the, you know, some of that stuff, it just doesn't make sense.
Don't they tell you what they, but I mean, at some point, are they gonna tell you what they use that discretionary money for?
That goes back to their plan.
Well,
Yeah, I know,
plans
but
are
we
all
saw
over
those
the
plans,
place,
and
they're
those
not-
plans were
they're not-
ridiculous. They
they're
don't
not
look
real.
alike.
They're, you know, at some point, it's the trust scenario, because they purchase sometimes some minimal operational pieces. You know, they do purchase office supplies, they do purchase copy paper. You know, there are basic, you know, supplies that they purchase with these money to operate their school. They do purchase curriculum materials. Sometimes they purchase a piece of software for computers or, you know, instructional supplies. But many of their instructional resources actually come from, you know, Lilia's budget. All of their the textbooks, their digital resources, you know, that's all our curriculum instruction budget that pays for most of that. That they receive it, they don't purchase that on their own.
But what about the training that we wanted for the teachers? I mean, is that in there, is the,
Most professional development comes from the district, most money for that. Schools can use, they do have some money for professional
Right.
development, but most of that we fund centrally.
well, maybe some of the diversity training that we're talking about that we need, that all
It
of us
would
need,
be funded centrally.
would be, that might be something that we need to look at, that we need funding to make sure that we're all appropriately trained to do our jobs most effectively for everybody.
So,
Talk about equity funding,
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about pensions. I
Sure.
mean, the whole concept in my mind of equity funding was to equalize opportunities for these students.
That's correct. It is. It's to make sure that our most fragile children have an equal playing field, if you will. And sometimes
That's okay.
yeah, correct. But there are also other tools and resources. Sometimes it's people. You know, they need more people.
Sure.
We did not apply equity funding this year to people. We talked about that earlier. We just, because of COVID, we simply did not have the capacity to do that this year. But I believe, I mean, people are a big resource on campus, and there should be more people that serve our kids in poverty. More people should serve our special ed kids. More people are required to serve our EL kids. And that's where we hope to be next year, as we think about the human capital resources, that we're able to allocate more people to those students. But I mean, what you're saying is right. I think what I'm hearing is you want, from an accountability perspective, a better way to see how what schools are doing academically is tied to dollars. You know,
Even if it's not just academically, even if it's, I'm providing extra breakfast, or I'm putting a bathroom in the special ed classroom. I will agree that not everything that we do would necessarily have to do with the scores, although that's my hang up. But I want to know that it relates, that it helps those kids that we were trying to help level the playing field.
Maybe if they reported to us like quarterly or maybe, so we could see kind of how it's working, or, you know, maybe you could tell us how things are going. If this program's working really well, then this one maybe not so much, or kind of make sure that our money that we've been entrusted by the people is being effectively distributed the way it should be.
Yeah.
Is that what y'all are talking about too?
I was listening and, you know, I'm the source of all of this because I was plodding around in the budgets and so, you know, I'm sorry. But, I was looking at the budget from a really simple-minded, you know, numbers to numbers. And what I saw was that, you know, most of our schools got a little too more than a little more this year, and that most of the schools that got less than last year were concentrated in the D and the F categories. And it was just that story, that picture that made me concerned. And so honestly, I don't really want to nickel and dime you guys to get. You don't have to justify buying copy paper from Blackshear versus buying whatever else you buy someplace else. I just want to know that these schools that 2 years ago were kind of drowning, we're throwing them more rope.
Yep.
And whatever you can do that helps me understand that,
Yep.
that will make me happy. And I think one of the things that you all can do, and we've talked about it, it's not like you've not been busy these last few months.
Certainly.
But one of the things that we've talked about doing for us is showing us pre-spring break benchmarks for this year versus pre-spring break benchmarks last year.
Yes.
So we can just kind of get a sense of how we were doing before the bottom fell out with the pandemic.
Yep. Yep.
That would help. I just need to be soothed.
Okay, yeah.
The other thing, from my perspective, is I would like us to take this whole equity thing.
Yep.
And as a board, go into a lot more depth on the equity. What I picture here is not just giving a little more, a little more money for each of these student populations. I picture equity as a much bigger picture than that. And as a board, I'd like us to, like I picture equity as giving you more people.
Oh, yeah.
I picture equity as different resources and so as a board, I would like for next year's budget, before we go into this again, that we talk about equity and what we'd really like to see. And as we go into this training on sensitivity and I mean, equity is a big issue. What does equity look like to me for our district?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And again, the reason we didn't go there this year with people is we simply we were.
I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying.
Concerned with COVID, but
No, but
agree.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, just like we're gonna do sensitivity training for
Yeah.
other things, we can do special training just so that we can understand the budget a little bit better and it can be explained exactly whether we are doing it. We are addressing equity in our schools.
Right now, I can't see that I would feel like this particular thing, it's a small thing, it might be part of the big picture, but it's not a big picture.
Equity?
No, what we're doing for equity right now.
Oh, okay, I got you.
What
That's
we're
what
doing
equity
to
is.
address inequity right now doesn't feel like near enough to me.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that. There is clearly much more. I want to clarify something, and I'm going to defer to Art, and that is the difference. Our DNF schools did not get less this year. They got more. The reason in the budget it looks different from last year this year is because of the way the positions were funded last year versus the way they're funded this year. This year, our finance team, led by Art, did a much better job of actual personnel costs than the work that was done last year was not that. There were a lot of averages used last year, which inflated personnel costs. The number of positions remained the same in those schools. The amount of money those principals have to work with is more this year than it is last year. It is a result of personnel costs. So I don't want anyone to feel like our schools got less. Every school has more money this year, or this coming year. It's Art, you want to speak to that very specifically?
Don't speak to that just to address me, because what he said, you've addressed the questions I had regarding. And I'm not saying you can't talk about it, but don't worry about it in
Just,
terms of answering my question.
and I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail, but what I wanna say is kind of echo what Dr. Murray has said, and say it in my own words, that we have within our budget accounts that are student-driven accounts. They're allocated based on a per student basis. And we have a lot of our other accounts that are not. They're based on teacher units, or they're based on utilities, or they're based on the copier contracts that exist that we charge to each one of those campuses. There are a lot of our accounts that are not student driven. They're driven by other factors. And so when you, like the roof, for example, where a campus gets a roof this year, they don't get it next year, a different campus gets it. But if you isolate just those accounts that are student driven, every single campus in the district receive more money. And those districts with the highest the student counts of the highest need, they received more money than the others that had the lower need. And so in that respect, it was an equity-driven process for those accounts that are student-driven, ignoring the other accounts that are not student-driven. They're driven by other factors. And so those were there. I think I want to go back to something Dr. Murray had mentioned earlier, is earlier in the year that he would like to go to a true modified zero-based budget approach. And I think what we started with the student counts is a first step in that direction. I think they're given. I think we've do a lot of things within our budget. State compensatory education, Title I, Title II, all those different pots of money that are directed toward a specific population of students, special ed. Those are equity-based driven funding, but I think we just need to do a better job of telling you how we use those funds, and we can do that. But I think what I want to say in summary, if that's the right word, is that those accounts that are student driven, every single campus received more money, and those campuses with the great student needs received the most money.
Very good. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Motion's been made by Dr. Smith, seconded by Dr. Brown. And so, no other comments or questions? Let's have a vote. All in favor? Thank you, and thank you, Art.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
I'll think you're done.
Okay, so next one is to discussion of a request for approval of resolution committing fund balance in accordance with GASB.
And this is the item that we discussed last week at our workshop, and I really don't have any additional comments to make with respect to this item, and I would entertain any questions you have, and we request your approval.
I move we approve this item.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Oh, any questions? Sorry. All in favor? Motion is unanimous. The next one is yours too. Discussion of a request for approval of year-end budget amendment.
This is an annual item that we bring to you each year, here at the end of the fiscal year. As you know, our fiscal year ends June 30th. And so this is our year-end amendment, just to adjust our accounts to get ready for the upcoming audit. And I would answer any questions you might have, and would request your approval.
Any questions?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. And the next motion is discussion of a request for approval of purchases over $50,000. You have any?
Yes, ma'am. We just have one item, and it's we want to build out at the Permian High School baseball field a restroom, and we have solicited bids, and we've received a bid in the amount of $424,193 from Onyx General, and we would answer any questions you might have and would ask for your approval. What's the expected completion? Date of completion? 80 days, is that correct?
No. The date of completion would be potentially the end of January. Quick, before possibly
Baseball season.
the utilities is a big issue that could.
Is it really before baseball season?
Oh, yes, that is a goal, yes.
Is this something we discussed and approved building a bathroom there before?
I don't know at what level we discussed that, to be honest with you. This is an item that I think is, and I'll get Patrick to come up and talk about it, but I think it's an item that's kind of been talked about for a good while, and the cost, a lot of the costs related to this item is related to the utilities, trying to get the utilities over there where you can have electric and sewer and everything.
Well, yeah, that kind of begs for the question of the toilets for the special ed kids. Remember that woman that talked to us about it? So, I mean, if we're thinking about this, I don't even know if it's proper to be talking about it, but we need to talk about it at some point in time, and we need some kind of report about what we're doing about those portables that don't have any toilets.
Yes, ma'am. I think her request.
We got an answer for you today.
Yes, we did.
Oh,
So you got it.
So,
I'm gonna speak
but we
to
had
you. You wanna- Carol's question?
have we talked about building a bathroom, or is this the first time we've heard that we're gonna build a bathroom?
No, ma'am. I think it's been on our radar for a long time. As I talked with in the board review, Odessa High has a restroom, and so at the baseball facility at Odessa High, and at Permian, we have to bring in porta potties annually during baseball season. So, like Art said, we had 6 bidders, so we had a very, very healthy bid process, and 3 of those bids were over $500,000. And so, like Art said, the utilities going from the south side of the baseball facility around to Dawn and then up Dawn for both sewer and water and electricity is driving this cost up. We are negotiating, as it says on in the board book, we're negotiating that price down. We think we're going to be able to get it down under $400,000. And so,
Where's the money from this, where this coming from?
this is left over from athletic money. It's money from last year that was not, we did not use because of the shutdown.
And this would be a public bathroom facility?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And how large?
Richard with JSA could probably help answer that. It's total building is 600 square feet.
Is there men and women's?
It's a men's and women's separate restrooms, and it'll have 3 ladies stalls and a man's stall and 2 urinals.
For the boys' baseball, is that gonna be big enough for the boys, or
It's just for the game.
just during the game? They
Yeah.
don't know.
Right. And I will add one other thing that we're going to do. The concession stand doesn't have water either, so we're going to
Oh,
take water into the concession stand so that they can wash their crock pots and whatever else they need to wash.
I think it helps improve our cell food. I don't have one.
Do we have a motion?
Sure.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any other comments? All in favor? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is item G, discussion and request for approval to modify board policy DEA local compensation benefits compensation.
Yes, President Avalos, Dr. Mary, members of the board, I have the next several items, so I won't say that every time. But this item is policy DEA local. We talked about this last week during first read, and what would a board need to do without policy DEA local on it. We brought you revisions a month ago, and when we submitted them to our new TASB policy consultant, because we do have a new one that's very thorough and we're really excited about that, pointed out that we had taken a piece out that we need to leave in for any future disasters that we have that are required. It's required language that we would need for FEMA reimbursement. So all this is doing is putting that language back in that we need to ensure we have in place before a disaster. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those. Otherwise, I would recommend approval of the revisions to DDA local.
Motion is approved.
Okay, motion's been made by Dr. Brown, seconded. Seconded by Dr. Smith. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, Stephanie, you're on. Okay.
Yes, the next item is the resolution regarding premium pay. This will run from June 17th through July 31. And again, this will be the same premium pay resolution that we've had in place for the last month. It requires superintendent approval, and we have certain groups of employees that will continue to receive premium pay, but it does limit it to that. I do want to point out, and I appreciate Tatiana, and I'm sure some of you, because I know there's some English teachers like myself on the board that may have caught the typos. So I do want to go ahead and just point those out. We do have a typo in paragraph 2. Neither have any significance on the meaning of the resolution. So I would ask that you approve the resolution and allow us to correct the typo as needs to be added and then during.
Okay, sounds good. Does anybody have any questions? Motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. Hawkins, seconded by Ms. Gregg,
Yes.
or Judge Gregg. Any other questions? All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. And you've got the next one too?
Yes, the next item is policy DFFA local. Again, this is for approval. We went through this last week. This is related to a reduction in force, and I do want to remind everyone that while we do not anticipate having to use this policy at all, it is a good time to revisit it and make sure that if we ever had to use it, it is in a format that we like. After our discussions with you last time, on page 3 of 5 of that policy, we did add in on the student growth piece the 3 consecutive years of data. And that way, if a teacher were to be new to a grade level or were to be new to a content area, it wouldn't be a 1-year source of data, it would be 3 years of data. And so that way, we feel like that's the fairest approach for our employees while still being able to measure the student growth. That also aligns with section B related to evaluation. On their evaluations, appraisals, all of that is for a 36-month time period, a 3-year period as well, so it aligns with that. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Otherwise, I would recommend approval for DFFA local.
Any questions? Motion?
So moved.
Okay.
It's hard when they're not sitting by each other.
Motion made by Judge Gregg, seconded by Dr. Brown. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next one is DFFB local. This is a very similar policy. Instead of reducing forces related to people, this is if we had to make a program change. And so the revision is exactly the same. It's on page 204 of the policy. Again, addresses the 3 years of data when available and aligns with the evaluation being a 36-month period. I'll answer any questions. Otherwise, I'd recommend approval.
So moved.
Motion being made by Judge Gregg. Second? Dr. Brown? All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, the next item is item K, and it's discussion of and request for approval of contracted services agreement with Center for Education Policy Research, Harvard University, Strategic Data Project Fellowship Agreement.
Yes, that's a mouthful.
It was a mouthful.
So I'm going to add some abbreviations in there as I present tonight. So thank you, President Avalos, trustees, and Dr. Mary. Tonight I'll be discussing and asking for your approval to engage in a 2-year partnership with Harvard Graduate School of Education, otherwise known as Harvard GSE, and the Center for Policy Research through the Strategic Data Partnership Grant, which is shortened by SDP. So I just want to give you a very high-level overview of this opportunity. SDP was formed based on two basic principles. The first one I think is very important, that policy and management decisions have a direct influence on schools and teachers' ability to improve student achievement. I mean, that second basic principle is the power of valid and reliable data analysis and the impact it has on significantly improving the quality of the decision making. So what will Harvard prepare and do for us? Well, they're going to prepare and match us with one data fellow over a period of 2 years. And that data fellow will be responsible for building our district capacity to leverage data in new ways to inform our policy and decision making. They will also bring high quality research methods that possibly we aren't aware of, and then to facilitate the strategic use of the data. Something that I'm really excited about is their ability to provide high quality data analysis and analytic support on projects that are regarding pressing issues. For example, something we've discussed is the impact of COVID-19 on students both academically and emotionally. So that could be a pressing issue project that they could help facilitate gathering some data and then helping us to analyze and use that data. This opportunity also gives us access to a national network of data focused on K-12 reform that will give us usable knowledge to build our internal capacity. And then also exciting, following this 2-year project, we would have the opportunity, if the data fellow proves themselves to be of our assistance, we have the opportunity to hire that data fellow. First, the trick is getting them to move here, and that's step 1. So they're actually screening for that person for us right now. I think you have more information in your board packet, so I'll open it up to questions. I have Annette Macias back there in the audience available to ask questions. And then if there are no questions, then I do ask for your approval of the contracting services agreement with Harvard, GSC, and the Center of Education Policy Research for the years 2020 through 22.
Will all schools be able to use this person, or will be there specific schools that will be using this person?
They're actually here to support the district,
The
so
whole
any way that we see fit,
So
yes,
every school has the opportunity to use this person.
prioritized based on what the district's fund, the district finds to be priority. But yes, I see this having potential to help every school. It impacts our decision-making abilities as well, which we should use to help.
Well, maybe it could help our schools that are like the DNS schools and stuff like that too, maybe to be able to give them some extra boost.
Will that person be in residence here?
Yes. They'll be here.
Here.
Yeah, that's great.
And they will be under Stephanie.
They will actually report to Executive Director of Accountability, Annette Macias.
Well, I know Annette is a numbers person, so certainly appreciate somebody knowing what they're doing.
Thank you.
She is very excited.
Very good. Any other comments?
It's probably in here somewhere, but I'm missing it. I can't find it now. How much is it?
Annette, help me out with that. It's over a 2-year period. I think it's $90,000 a year over 2 years.
It's
Yes.
a salary.
Yes.
This contract is for $59,000.
59,000.
That's the salary.
It's on page 23.
That's the contract. So there's the position
Oh, okay.
and then the contract. So this is the contract. So for the
Contracts,
Yes.
the positions.
Yeah.
Part-time
Yeah.
training.
Up to probably won't be that much. Yeah, but
I think you've answered this, and so I'm reluctant to ask it, but I don't know the answer. Do we know what we will want this person, have we identified the problems that we want this person to help us with? Or is that going to be something that is done in correspondence with the person once he or she gets here?
So I think the answer is both. Once this person comes on board and we do identify those areas that we need their support, of course, we do have control over some of that. I'm most excited about giving them the opportunity to possibly see some things that maybe we have blind spots to, based on their ability to research and use data. So Dr. Smith, I think it would be both.
two big bodies of work we've identified initially. One is the teacher incentive allotment and the impact of TIA on our system. That'll be a good long-term project for this person. The second one is opportunity culture and the impact of our opportunity culture work on student achievement in ECISD. So those are both very complex technical issues, and to have somebody with research expertise to study both of those would be pretty powerful for us.
The idea being that this person would be sort of an assessor of how successful.
They would actually design, develop, and implement the research studies that would go along with one or both of those projects. So that is their expertise, is in research, design, development, and implementation. So,
Could they possibly be able to identify how our various approaches to long-distance learning and COVID impact learning?
could, if that's more short-term, you know, a lot of this is going to.
That's optimistic.
Well, yeah, it is. But a lot of this will depend on the expertise of the person and what their interests are. So we've got several big bucket items that we need them to tackle. But they will also bring a skill set to the table once we interview and make a decision. And so that some of that will be based upon really who the person is and what interest they may have.
And I think they could bring a whole new perspective that we've never even thought of, that I think is going to be exciting, that we don't even know about.
And people from Harvard want to come here.
Oh, I bet we can find one.
There's already one candidate.
That's all right.
There you go, sister.
See?
Just for clarification, the agency fellow and the data fellow are two different organizations within Harvard in this program.
Yeah, the strategic data fellow is the individual.
That we're bringing.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And the fee that we pay to get that person here
Yeah.
is the 49,000.
Yeah, that's the 59, and that's the agreement that we have with
59
Harvard.
is for the data fellow. They're two different fees, right?
Yeah, the fellow is the person.
Okay.
And the other is directly to Harvard.
Yeah, the other
Department, whatever.
is the support that we're getting over the next 2 years, the support that the person will be getting, and the support that we'll be getting from the university itself.
And then there's the salary of the person.
Salary,
Yeah.
correct, exactly. Yes,
I got
yes,
you.
yes, yes. This person is supported by a whole team of people at
Sure.
Harvard, so you're kind of getting one person, but you're also getting an interesting team. Yeah.
And they will provide some direction for the person.
Yeah,
Guidance.
yes.
And so when is the deadline? When will we know we have more than one interested?
Did you want to answer that? Once the contract is approved, I send it to our representative at Harvard, and then she will get me more information as to how many more candidates we do have. As of last week, we did have one candidate. But we can't move forward with interviews until we have the contract.
For an unusual placement for them, typically it's a Chicago and New York, a Charlotte and Miami, and Los Angeles.
God bless them.
So
They could probably find a place to
we
live.
are, that's right.
So is there a motion?
Oh, I'll make that motion. This is great.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Thank you so much.
It's unanimous.
This is exciting. We're not being silly. We are very excited that somebody from Harvard wants to help us.
Absolutely, we're excited too.
This
This
is
is
very
okay.
exciting for all of us. Everybody's gonna win in this.
Very excited, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, can I have the consent agenda? Am I correct or did I skip something? Okay, the academic calendar, sorry, Lindy, I wonder why you were up here for consent agenda.
And you're wondering calendar again?
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, President Avalos, Dr. Miri, and trustees. So we come before you again with a new calendar that really addresses the needs that we're going to see, that we're anticipating due to the COVID pandemic. So what you're looking at is the ECISD calendar where we have added 11 additional instructional days. Now, this does not affect the teacher calendar, as that still remains 187 days for teachers. So in essence, we are adding the 11 instructional days because as we know, we see research, we know that the pandemic and the school closure is going to have an adverse effect on children, particularly the younger children in the areas of math. So the additional days that we've added will allow us to provide the instruction where we will be able to spiral in some of the learning objectives that we know students will need some direct instruction or reinforcement for through those 11 additional days. So, and as Representative Landgraf spoke to you, because now we have 180 instructional days on our academic calendar, we do then qualify for the additional days at the end of the year, which are 30 half days that will be funded by the state of Texas for elementary students. So it's a win-win. We will be able to support our students there's something flying around here, sorry. We will be able to support our students instructionally with the additional days, and we will benefit from the additional days school year that was provided by House Bill 3. In addition to that, you'll notice that we've changed what we've traditionally called our bad weather days or our weather days to COVID exchange days, and we've added 2 of those during the week of Thanksgiving. So we will be able to utilize and flex those days based on whether we need to close for any purpose or if we have bad weather. So that gives us more flexibility in our calendar. You will also see that we have included the OC text and the OC text and the OCA calendars. Those are just slightly different based on alignment with Odessa College. And I do want to say that Alamo, which is usually a different calendar, because these additional 11 days even add more instructional days to their extended day calendar, that they were just included in the ECISD calendar.
Did we ever approve a calendar? We didn't do that. Did we?
Yes,
have we
ma'am.
already approved a calendar?
Yes, ma'am.
But I wasn't sure whether we'd already approved one.
So this changes that. And one change, trustees, that we made from last week to this week based upon feedback, we eliminated the 4 virtual learning days and simply replaced them with regular school days. That's really what they were. The confusion was really from moms and dads that interpreted those 4 virtual days as the only 4 days their kids would be at home, and that's just probably not going to be the reality. And so we thought the best way to clarify that is simply to eliminate them, and now we have 180 school days that all look the same. The reality, however, will be that some children will be coming to school on Sundays while other kids will be home on other days, and more to come on that. But the calendar at least clarifies for everyone that we have 180 school days, and then we'll determine at a later date kind of what participation is going to look like.
So when do you think we're going to be? I mean, I know some districts have already, Monday and Wednesday will be these kids, and Tuesday and Thursday.
I'll hit that with you in the COVID update, but it's going to be a bit of time. We've got a little bit of, the information from Texas continues to change from the state, and so we have another update coming next week.
The only reservation I have is put out this calendar, and then I'm going to put out another calendar that says, Monday and Tuesday, these kids will come.
Yeah, this calendar would stay the same because every day is going to be a school day.
Right, but parents who see this calendar, I mean, I think they need to be cautioned as we put this out, to be aware that this is the calendar, but your child may not attend school on every one of these days, because I don't want parents to see this and think, okay, well, now we've got it all, I don't have to worry about this.
Yeah, that's correct. That is correct. Yes.
We did put this out for community and staff feedback like we did the prior calendars, and we did get some quality feedback from the community and staff members.
I just have a couple of questions because I've had some. The summer school is all optional. No child is required to do summer school, correct? In K through, or am I wrong?
So let's separate the two things. There's the traditional summer school that some kids have to attend because they were retained.
Right.
What you're looking at on the calendar, however, is an extended school year. And that is an optional program for elementary kids only.
Okay.
So optional
Okay, thank you.
and only elementary.
Okay.
And so optional for staff as well.
Okay.
So purely optional.
And it's half a day in the summer. Okay. And some of them, the parents asked me if, could they drop in kids? Like go like 2 days a week and bring their kids in for a couple of days or, because they would be traveling. I should hope not because it's not good care. I'm just asking. Don't kill the messenger. Okay, I'm just asking this question because there's gonna be that question.
Have yet to design.
Okay. That's not in the design. And then in July is the secondary, correct? Now, this is
No, ma'am.
secondary experience.
In June, you will see the secondary. That's going to be your traditional opportunity for students to make up credits, do some credit recovery, things like that. But the extended or the additional days for elementary start in June as well.
And they're only half a day.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. In the summer. Okay.
Now, what we offer for our secondary students is we offer them 3 different times to come to school or to log in to their online platform to recover credits. So we have 8 to 11, 1 to 4, and then 5 to 7 in case students have to work and things like that. We have people on the telephone or ready to serve them or answer any questions. So we have 3 sessions for the high schools, which really they leverage all 3 times.
I understand what a bad weather day looks like, but I don't understand what a COVID exchange day. Could you give me a scenario where we would do that?
Yes, ma'am. So say there's an outbreak, and we, the CDC or the county or the city is, or we make the decision to close a school. We can close it and utilize those days very similar to like we would with a bad weather day. And so then we have these days on the calendar to make up those days. So if we have a school closure in September, and then you see that in November we have 2 days to make those up, that's the opportunity to.
So we might close a school to clean it deeply or something like that. Just close a school for quarantine is 14 days.
Correct.
Yeah, we have, so with those days, it gives us built-in days that we can use for makeup. If we close for 14 days as a district, we could make up 4 or 5 of those days during that time. We may not make up some of them. We may choose to add out minutes to the day to make some of those days. It's just giving us maximum flexibility to do what we may or may not need to do. So.
Are there any further questions? And we appreciate you considering this calendar for approval.
Okay, so is there a motion to accept the revised academic calendar for 2020-2021? That is also a
So moved.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Unanimous. Okay, so now we're at the consent agenda. Okay, so
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously.
No comments.
I didn't ask for any, did I? Okay, so where are we here?
Item
11? 10A, okay, 10A. It's a report, discussion item, discussion of ECISD. It's going to answer a lot of our questions, response to COVID-19.
Probably won't answer your questions, it'll probably raise many more questions. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail. We provide pretty regular updates to folks, but a couple of things to share tonight. First of all, the way that we are tackling this opportunity in the fall, we have formed, led by Dr. Howard, a large task force of individuals, teachers, administrators, staff members, parents, and high school kids that are part of 17 different committees. And these committees are studying, if you will, and making recommendations for what the opening of school will look like in the fall. We're looking at transportation as an example. How will we we can't put 70 kids on a school bus, how will we transport students in ECISD to and from school? So what will that process look like? If we can't put 30 kids in a classroom, then how many can we put in there safely, and what will that look like? If we need to limit the mobility of kids and staff members around a campus, what does that look like? On a high school in which every period a bell rings and lots of kids are running through the halls. How do we avoid that and still educate kids? How do we make sure that our most fragile kids are served? Our fragile kids being our kids that are at risk, our kids of poverty, our special ed kids, those kids that did not have a good remote learning experience. How do we make sure that those kids have more face time with teachers? How do we make sure that our elementary kids, which research say need more face time with teachers than secondary kids, how do we make sure that they're at school, if you will, more often than their peers? How do we use our facilities? And how do we clean our facilities and make sure they're disinfected? You've seen tonight, every time somebody gets up and speaks and they leave, we clean the podium. And what will that kind of disinfecting environment look like next year in our schools? So this committee is tackling all of these issues, and it is not an easy task. It is a monumental puzzle to put together. But that's the way we're approaching it. As really as a project. Opening up schools this year is a project. We've got to figure out how we're going to do this. We have a lot of people organized to kind of work on this project and make recommendations back to our cabinet, and then cabinet will kind of make decisions. There may be some things like the calendar tonight, kind of started talking to a bunch of people, and then it ultimately came here for your approval. But as we make decisions organizationally, then we'll communicate those to the public. Each week throughout the summer, we're communicating with the public in some very, we're leveraging our local media to do this. So every Wednesday for the rest of the summer, we're doing a press conference every Wednesday at 3:30. All members of the media are a part of that press conference, and we provide updates, and our media really does a great job of re-communicating that information to make sure that our public is aware. On Thursday nights, we do a Facebook Live session, and those are typically focused on the things that we're doing organizationally. Again, another way not only for parents and our community to hear from us, but they can also interact and ask questions during that time as well. And we'll continue to use a variety of ways to communicate what's happening in our organization. But there's a lot of work happening. It's really the focus of the entire organization is what will school look like. Some districts have announced some things. I talk to the commissioner a lot these days. There's a lot going on. And some districts, and a couple of them have jumped out ahead and have made some decisions that may not be supported by some things that the state is getting ready to roll out. And sometimes it's nice to be a leader, but sometimes you might want to be more thoughtful in decisions that you make. And so some folks may have to backtrack in the coming days based upon some correct guidance. So what we're hearing from the state right now, and we'll have some more specifics next week as a school system, but we're hearing that restrictions that we currently operate under may be loosened a little bit next year. And our focus may be on, and our facilities folks understand this, on securing the envelope, securing the building envelope, basically making sure that that virus does not come into your building, and doing whatever you can to make sure that the virus stays out and learning stays in. And that may be our new focus, if you will, is to think about what will we put in place to ensure that the virus does not enter our buildings. But right now, when you walk into this building, and many of you have it tonight, your temperature was taken when you walked in. If your temperature was above 100, then you were walked back out. You have a face covering that you wear to make sure that if indeed the virus is living within you, that you keep it to yourself and not share it with others. We ask you a series of questions every time you enter this building to make sure that you haven't been exposed to the virus. And if you answer yes to any of those questions, then you're not allowed to come into this building. And in our schools, we may have to think like that next year. How will we ensure that whoever enters, that they are as safe as they can possibly be? And so that is something that we're thinking about right now. Another piece we're thinking about is funding, and this is a piece that the Brooks was here earlier tonight. I think he's gone now, he already left. But next year, we may have to do a lot of engaging of our elected officials as we think about school funding. There's some argument happening right now among various legislators as they think about funding school. Currently, in the state of Texas, if a child is at home, no matter what they're doing at home, we do not receive the funding for that child. For the last 3 months, the state legislature funded us as if kids were in school, and the reality is no kid was in school in our state, and yet we received the funding. Next year, there are legislators that are not interested potentially in doing that again. Well, the reality is we've already been contacted by parents who have already said that they will not send their children to school next year. They're not going to. And they expect their kids to be educated at home. And we've already committed to those parents that we will do that. We will educate your children. Even if you refuse to send them to school, we will educate them at home. But we have some legislators right now that aren't quite sure they want to pay for that. Well, that would be a real problem. Statistically, right now in Texas, school districts across our state have conducted some surveys, and right now the data say that 30% of our kids will not attend school next year across the state. That's 30%. Imagine in our district, if 30% of our kids stayed home next year, and we were not funded for those children, we would be in financial ruin, because talk about the RIF policy, we would quickly have to exercise the RIF policy, because if 30% of our budget was cut, then that would decimate the work that we're doing as an organization. So we have to, what's happening right now is we are working very diligently with our legislature and the commissioner to think through attendance next year, and how can we make our legislators feel comfortable that the education that we will provide to children next year, whether it's in a building or at home, is as high quality as we can possibly make it. Our legislators need that reassurance that that's going to happen. Now, there are other legislators that fully understand that we're in a pandemic situation, and we're going to do the very best we can do, no matter where kids are. But there is some debate right now happening at the state level, and we may need to be a bit more active next year because things could get a little interesting. So right now, we're fighting the good fight. Next week, we may hear some news from the commissioner about funding for next year. So we'll pay attention to that, and that announcement may drive some of our behaviors next year with students, because we simply cannot afford to be underfunded, knowing that we've got to educate 34,000 kids. So 2 pieces tonight. One is large committee working on the structure, and the second one is funding is something we're paying a lot of attention to and very engaged in that conversation, and I'll keep you updated there. But those 2 go hand in hand, because once the funding decision is finally made, it will certainly drive some of the things that we do locally. So happy to answer any questions that you have about that or anything else that you're curious about.
So if we send a child home because they have fever, do they have to stay home? Are we going to determine they have to stay open a certain amount of time?
So we will rely heavily upon the guidance from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, as well as any guidance that our local health care providers and the state of Texas may provide. And right now, Alicia is kind of the liaison between the district and the health department, and she has a list, and it changes regularly, about the requirements. In fact, today, we had a situation that we had to make a call to the health department about a student situation, and we needed some guidance in what we are to tell other kids and teachers because of the situation. So that guidance continues to evolve. Whatever the guidance is in August from the CDC and our local health department, that is what we will use to make decisions for the kids in our system.
And if we do send them home, or is it our plan to try to figure out how to send home education with them?
Absolutely. Well, we will be educating kids at home next year as well as in our buildings. Again, we already have parents that have already informed us they will not be sending their children to school next year, but they expect their kids to be educated virtually. And we will provide that next year. So we will be doing both. So that child that does get sick, your fever is 101, we're going to send them home for sure. That's the unfortunate news. The good news is once they get home, they can continue their learning because we're going to provide that pre-K through 12th grade for all kids.
So we'll have maybe some teachers teaching in the classroom and some virtual teachers, or
That's what we're working on right now. What exactly will that look like for kids? Part of the $1 million question.
Seems sort of a fantasy that we're going to keep the virus out there and the kids in here. I don't know what Technicolor Disney show we're watching here, but if we could do that, we wouldn't have any problems anywhere.
I think all we can do is put really good processes and systems in place to do the very best we can. At the end of the day, we will have kids that will walk in the building and they'll not have a single sign or symptom. They will be carriers of the virus and they will transmit it to other people. That is going to happen and we have to be ready for that.
Because the more information just seems to show more and more that people, a substantial number of people don't show symptoms.
That's correct. And that will certainly happen in our building. All we can do is follow all of the CDC guidance and make sure that, again, what we're doing to the very best of our ability protects our kids and our teachers, and we can assure that they're protected. At the end of the day, you're right. There are human beings that do not show symptoms and have the virus.
So at what point do we start training our bus drivers about taking temperatures and asking these questions? And then when do we envision that we can start training people to understand they're going to have to do these things?
That's part of even the funding situation deals with that exact thing right now. At what point in the process do you ask the questions of a child? So if I'm a 6-year-old, or if my 6-year-old is at the bus, the bus driver can ask the 6-year-old some questions, but the 6-year-old may not know how to answer the questions. Certainly it's easier to take the temperature of that 6-year-old, but if they can't answer the questions, then what does that process look like? That's what we're working on.
You're going to have to simplify those questions.
That's exactly right. And at the end of the day, because it is a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old or even a 17-year-old, isn't the parent still legally the responsible person that should answer the questions? And these are things that we are wrestling with right now. What does that process look like? And how often do you ask those questions? And once you have the answers to the questions, where do those answers go? Because they're medical questions and answers. This is very complex. It is very complex.
What's the first day of school again?
Yeah, exactly. It's 2025, August 23rd. The first day of school that you just voted on for kids is August 12th. Yeah.
Well, I don't envy you because I just like you said, there's going to be a lot of problems. There's a lot of questions with no answers.
Yeah. And we've used 2 words a lot in the last several months, and that's flexibility and agility. Decisions today are different tomorrow because the information changes. And I can assure you that these 2 points tonight, Stephanie may have 17 committees today, but she may have 19 next week because more information is discovered. Our ADA, what I think may happen today, may be very different next week. We are being encouraged, and this is what we want. At the end of the day, we'd love every kid to be in school every day. And and if we can make that happen and ensure that every kid is safe, then that's ideally where we would be. I'm not sure that is a reality today. I'm not sure we can do that. But what we have to feel confident in is whatever the number of kids may happen to be that we can serve, and however many staff members we can support, that they're safe in our environment. And we will work to make sure that happens to the very best of our ability.
And to the other 70%, they said thank you. It's going to take their kids in the class. I think there's a lot of parents that are tired of being a teacher.
That's exactly right. We hear that a lot.
Are there other facilities that we conceivably use to take students from the high school and put them, at a big church or somewhere else to divide kids up in a manner that?
One of the things that that we're considering and others have considered is, the research says elementary students need more face time than secondary students. Well, that means that if we kept more of our secondary students home, that actually opens up our own secondary facilities. And so could we convert some of our secondary facilities into elementary facilities to ensure that every elementary kid is physically present every day? And so that's part of the facility conversation we're having, is how do we use our own space to make sure that every elementary kid can be served every day. You know, there are already school districts that have announced, you know, in fact, one, I don't remember the district, but, you know, they've already, they're closing a high school to convert it to an elementary. And their high school kids will be at home because they're going to serve their elementary kids face to face. Those are questions we're wrestling with. I mean, that, you know, it is complex. It's not easy. So.
You know, something that I hope that we put out there and make sure that people get a grasp of this is that they don't overreact.
Sure.
You know, don't make a child feel like they have COVID-19 because they sneeze or cough. You know, let's make sure that,
Sure.
well, you know, we can't just go around accusing everyone, but some of these things are going to be put in place as safety measures.
Yep.
And if we sell it like that, it's going to go a longer way than immediately saying, well, you know, you got to stay home because you have COVID-19 or.
The best thing that we can do right now, and we're hearing this from the state a little bit too, is local context in August is going to matter a lot, and that's what's happening in our own community. And you know, there are three things that we can all do, and they're not just our parents and kids and us, but it's every member of this town, and that is to, you know, make sure that our hands are clean. You know, wash your hands regularly, use sanitizer. You know, if we were doing that as a community, we're in much better shape come August to welcome our kids back. If everybody is wearing a face covering when you're out in public, you know, if this happens, then we are going to be in much better shape as a community to welcome our kids back. And the last one is face, hands. Thank you. Stay away from people. You know, look at us tonight. The reason that we are organized like we are is because we are social distancing. And if we do that as a community, then we will be healthier in August and in April, and we'll be able to welcome more of our kids back. Right now, what's happening in our community, I think the number today was 15 new cases just today. You know, our cases in our own community are escalating. And if that is our reality in August, you know, we're in trouble as a school system because that can't happen in our schools. If we bring our kids back and we have the virus in our buildings, you know, we will be out quickly. And we don't want that. So taking care of ourselves as a community is really the best thing that all of us can do right now, and for the rest of the summer.
So, are you in contact with other county leaders to keep that focus about wearing the mask, social distancing, washing the hands, sanitizing?
Every Wednesday morning, the city leaders meet. So it's myself, the president of Odessa College, the president of UTPB, the mayor, the judge, the county or the city manager, and some of our first responders, the leaders of our police and fire department. So we meet every Wednesday morning, and our conversations are about these very things. What's the latest, what's happening in our community, and then what's happening in our individual organizations. Because we are of like mind that we know we have to tackle this as a community. And those meetings have been happening for the last 3 months since this virus took place. And every Wednesday morning, it's an update, what are we doing, and what do we need to help with. So a lot of marketing. Mike Atkins over here, he is a part of the city and the county have organized through the chamber some marketing strategies to make sure that we as a community can tell the message, and it's the same message from the school district as it is from the city, as it is from the county. So there's some work happening from a marketing perspective to make sure that people are doing what they need to do. It's a big task.
Anything else? Any questions, Evan? Okay, so we go to item 11, and it's possible request for approval to move to closed meeting, personnel matters, section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code. The board will deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee of the district, or hear a complaint or charge against an officer of the employee. The board will deliberate the hiring of executive director of curriculum and instruction, executive director of special services, executive director of student and school support, and campus principals for Hastings Academy. And then we come back with a request for approval for personnel recommendations. So we move into closed session at 8:04. Okay, it's 8:27 and we're back in open session. Oh, I'm sorry. It's still on me, isn't it? We have a request for approval of personnel recommendations.
I move that we accept the following personnel recommendations from the superintendent, executive director of curriculum instruction, Jamie Miller, executive director, special services, Leslie Wilson, executive director, student and school support, Robin Garcia, Hayes STEM Academy, Holland Danaheim.
Second. A motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? The motion is unanimous. And that being the last thing, I think, hold on. Yeah, information items.
No closing remarks?
Okay then, that's a go, we're done. Thank you guys for coming and staying.
Stephanie, did you want this piece of paper
We
back
are
so you can
adjourned.
put the next month's recommendations on it?
Yeah, I'll just add.
It's a-
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, and then, oh, all of it goes.
Already got their right.
Yeah,
one in the
we do.
minutes.
I'm gonna leave. Oh, it's